This half hour takes us to Lesotho, where Tom Thabane is the country's new Prime Minister. The inauguration was attended by tens of thousands of his supporters at the Setsoto Stadium in the capital, Maseru. For more on the Lesotho inauguration, we're now joined on the line by our reporter in Maseru, Nthakoana Ngatane. Nthakoana, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us about the proceedings today.
Good evening, Peter. As early as before sunrise, the supporters of Tom Thabane's Basotho Convention, his coalition partners Alliance of Democrats, Basotho National Party and Reformed Congress of Lesotho filled up the Setsoto Stadium, a 15,000-seater stadium, and it was overflowing by sunrise. And so we saw His Majesty King Letsie III leading the ceremony with Her Majesty Queen Masenate in the presence of regional leaders, President of Zambia Edgar Lungu, Prime Minister of Swaziland, and representative of the chairperson of SADC, King Mswati III, and that is Prime Minister Sibusiso Dlamini. We saw Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa in his capacity as SADC facilitator for Lesotho and the Executive Secretary of SADC, representatives of diplomatic missions resident in Lesotho and in South Africa who are accredited to Lesotho. And as you said, tens of thousands of those supporters in attendance. And what we saw was Tom Thabane taking his oath of office, allegiance to His Majesty King Letsie III, and taking the oath of office to be Prime Minister, and then taking over the instruments of government, the flag of the Kingdom of Lesotho and the Constitution from outgoing Prime Minister Pakadita Mosisili. He then made his statement, and that was followed by, or that was preceded rather, by statements from the leaders of the region, President Lungu, as well as Prime Minister Dlamini from Swaziland. Peter?
Well, sir, and what did those regional leaders say?
I beg your pardon, Peter?
What did those regional leaders say?
Well, as far as Edgar Lungu is concerned, his main stressing point was the issue that democracy seems to be very expensive in Lesotho, and he was urging Basotho to find a way to make democracy less expensive so that they can allocate those resources to development in the country. And as far as the Prime Minister from Swaziland, he congratulated Basotho. The King sent a message from the King of Swaziland, chairperson of SADC, Mswati III, saying that Lesotho has to go through reforms as much as SADC does, economic reforms, and those constitutional reforms suggested and encouraged by SADC to ensure that Lesotho finds stability. And he also talked about how Lesotho, in terms of the regional dynamics, has been on the agenda, but that this is an opportunity now after these elections showing that Lesotho can indeed go through democratic processes, can achieve its own stability, but also commending SADC facilitator, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, and the Christian Council of Lesotho for ensuring a peaceful election as well as a peaceful transition of power in Lesotho. Peter?
What about Prime Minister Thabane himself? What did he tell the people of Lesotho? Does he give us any clues of the kind of Lesotho that lies ahead?
Yes, indeed. The first thing that he spoke about, the ceremony itself was started with a moment of silence in memory of his second estranged wife, Dipolelo Thabane, who was gunned down on Wednesday. And his remarks centered around ensuring that Lesotho reverses what seems to be a downward spiral in lawlessness in the country. He also spoke about a message that he has been talking about throughout his campaigning, which is ending poverty in Lesotho and abhorring corruption, as he says, but also economic development in Lesotho. The other message that came out in his statement that has also dominated his speeches and those of his coalition partners, the Alliance of Democrats, particularly Munyane Muleleki, that of reconciliation, saying that since 50 years of independence in Lesotho, it looks like the country has been focused on divisions and discrimination. And he says that he will run a government that will not discriminate people, particularly along political lines, because that seems to be one of the main factors that make Lesotho a country that has a stagnation in terms of economic advancement. Peter?
All right, so that was the Prime Minister. We've heard about the leaders. What about the people themselves? Do you have a sense of how the Basotho are feeling at this new term of Tom Thabane?
Well, there'll always be mixed reactions, Peter, but 60% of the voting population in Lesotho has overwhelmingly chosen Tom Thabane and his coalition partners, and it seems it was on the message, and they were ululating as he kept saying those words, reconciliation and unity for Lesotho. It seems that is the message that has won him a lot of support, probably even from the quarters of the outgoing Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Pakadita Mosisili, and his allies, who throughout election campaigning were preaching segregation and defining the differences between what we call Congress and nationalist supporters in Lesotho. So his message of reconciliation seems to have resonated with Basotho, and even those that traditionally would speak for the Congress movement, you hear them saying that the message that Tom Thabane seems to be selling of reconciliation for Lesotho has earned him their support at this particular point in time. So that is what we saw. And the celebrations went on. We saw on the streets of Maseru following this inauguration, people in cars and on the streets either dressed in the SABC colors of yellow and other colors of the coalition partners, celebrating on the streets of Maseru, saying that maybe this is a new regime, or even if it's not different, or even if it's not a new one, but perhaps it's one that has learned with its mistakes in the past and maybe will bring a different tune to governance in Lesotho. Peter?
And perhaps finally, of course, overshadowing all of this, as you mentioned earlier, the death of the president's second estranged wife. Are we any closer to knowing anything about what happened there?
At this point, we can only rely on what the police say, apart from confirming the events that led to her shooting and confirming who was with her and how it occurred. They have only said that, the police, they've only said that they are investigating. They do not have any leads. They have no idea who it is that would have committed this crime. So at this point in time, we can only wait on the police investigations to be concluded for us to get a sense of why it was that it happened and who it is that committed it. Peter?
All right, and that's where we'll leave it. Our thanks to Nthakoana Ngatane, who's our reporter there in Lesotho, bringing us up to date with the celebrations and the taking of oath of office by Prime Minister Tom Thabane, who's the new Prime Minister of Lesotho.